Okay, well, as Professor Pastes said, I'm working for a private company now. The name is Perfect Food, and basically at Perfect Food we work as a consultant, and what we do is to help companies in the agricultural and in the food sector to improve their sustainability step by step. And after helping them, we also find with them the best way to communicate the achievements. So we both assess their impacts, we improve these the environmental performances, and then we also find a way with them to communicate the results. And okay, so first of all, life cycle assessment. Why should we use it? Well, it's a very powerful tool to measure and compare things. So here you can see a very simple comparison among different products, among different food products. You can see biscuits, tomato sauce packed in a glass bottle, beef meat, milk, pasta, apple, and mineral water. And the bar is the impact, the environmental impact. And you can see that the bar is composed of different segments. So you have the impact caused by the agriculture or animal farming process, so the production of the raw material. And then the raw material produced here is processed into an industrial plant, which is the red bar. And then there is the packaging of the product, the distribution, and the consumption. So if you have a look at the picture, you can see that for the biscuits, around 80% of the total impact is caused by the agricultural phase. So most of the impact is caused by the fertilizers you use to cultivate the wheat grain or the rice grain or whatever, and all the ingredients you put into the biscuits. While the industrial processing is responsible for around 10% of the impact, and there is a very low impact caused by the packaging and the distribution. And there is a similar trend here for the meat, and kind of similar also for the milk. While, for instance, you can see that the pasta, you thought that pasta and biscuits could be comparable, but you can see that in the pasta, around 50% of the impact is caused by the consumption. And this is because you have to cook pasta, you have to put it in boiling water, and just this simple process, like 10 minutes of water boiling at home, cause around 50% of the total impact of 1 kilogram of pasta. And another interesting thing here is that, for instance, in mineral water, you don't have at all the impact caused by the production of the raw material, because you don't have to produce mineral water, you just take it for free from nature. While you have a very high impact caused by the packaging of the water. So life cycle assessment is very interesting to compare things, and you see the products, you see the things from a different point of view after having carried out a life cycle assessment on them. Okay. But a very important thing is to compare things in a meaningful way, because you can compare only things that have the same function. For instance, even if they are food, you cannot compare 1 kilogram of lettuce and 1 kilogram of meat, because they have completely different nutritional values. So it doesn't make sense. But on the opposite, it's a good idea to compare two different types of milk boiled at home and milk processed into an industrial plant. And the thing you're seeing here, it's something very common. every process carried out at home is more impactant, has a higher impact than a process carried out into an industry. So everything you are doing at home is less efficient in terms of sustainability than an industrial process. And this is a comparison you can do, because you're comparing the same thing, 1 liter of milk and the grams of CO2 emitted to the air. Okay, then speaking again of food, this is another interesting thing I want to share with you. The one on the left is a food pyramid. I think you already know it. It shows you what you should eat during a week. So most of the things you should eat is composed of fruit and vegetables. Then you should eat bread, pasta, rice, carbohydrates, basically. And then seasoning, vegetable oil, animal fat, milk, yogurt, and cheese, and a small quantity of meat, fish, eggs, and legumes. This pyramid is on a mass basis, so in terms of kilograms of product. And the interesting thing is that if you respect this pyramid, you can see that the impact of the fruit and the impact of the meat in a week is kind of comparable, because this part of the pyramid has a very high impact, but you consume a small amount of it. So the total impact in a week is of 7.5 kilograms of CO2 equivalent, while on the opposite, the basis of the pyramid, you eat a high amount of these products. They have a low impact, but by multiplying the quantity by the impact, you get 6.7. These are averages, of course, but you can see that in a week, the impact of the vegetables you consume and the meat you consume is quite comparable. And since we spoke about food, now this is an example, a case study about feed. And this is a product of Skretting. Probably you already know Skretting because it is a company which produces feed for aquaculture species. And Skretting was the first company in the world that produced a feed which is completely carbon neutral. So basically, how does it work? Basically, they assessed the impact of a specific type of feed that they produce. They implemented actions to reduce this impact, and then they offset, they counterbalanced the remaining impact by the purchase of certified carbon credits. I don't know if you know what a carbon credit is, if someone before me already explained this concept. A carbon credit, basically, if you buy a carbon credit, you are buying the permission to emit 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. So this means that somewhere in the world there is a project which is absorbing CO2 for you. And if you purchase this carbon credit, you are paying for the project and for the service of this project. So they absorb CO2 and you buy the permission of emit the same amount of CO2. So it means that all the residual emission to produce this feed is counterbalanced by the carbon credits. And this is something very powerful for the marketing of this kind of feed, because life cycle assessment will put this kind of feed in a more competitive position compared to other types of aqua feed. Okay, so let's see how life cycle assessment works. You should let's see if it works. Okay. Nope. There should be a video, just give me 1 sec. Okay, yep, here we go. sorry. Oops, okay. Okay, so that's how basically it works. A life cycle assessment, I think Professor Pastres already explained you, give you an idea of all the steps this morning. We can do a recap here. So the very first thing you have to do while carrying out a life cycle assessment is to define the goal. So, for instance, this is an example on biscuits. If it all depends on the goals, it means that things are completely different among these 4 options. If I am asked on average to provide the carbon footprint impact of a general biscuit produced in the world, then I will just carry out a very quick review of scientific references. It's not even necessary to carry out a life cycle assessment. If instead I have to provide the carbon footprint of a biscuit produced in Europe, then I will have to make an integration and to provide, to integrate the data with information from technical reports. For instance, you can have a look here at environdec.com. It's a private certification scheme used in Europe, very popular in Europe. And here you can see the environmental footprint of several food products, several types of biscuits, pasta, and so on. If I'm asked to carry out to assess the carbon footprint of biscuits produced in a very specific company, then I will have to collect the data and collect the data directly from that company and carry out a life cycle assessment on that company. And again, if I want to go further into detail and I have to assess the carbon footprint of a specific type of biscuit produced in that company, in that year, in that plant, then, I mean, the level of detail is even higher, and I will have to collect a lot of primary data. I will have to put a lot of effort in carry out a life cycle assessment, and the results will be very, very precise. But it all depends on the goal. If I just want to have a rough idea, it doesn't make any sense to spend a lot of time in collecting very detailed data. And once I have chosen the goal, then I can define the scope of the process of my analysis. And if we keep using the example of biscuits, I will have to define the exact object I want to measure. So the quantity, 1 kilogram, 1 single biscuits, 1 tons of biscuits of this brand produced in that year in that company. And then I will have to define how I will assess the impact, because no, there is not one method. There are several methods to assess the impact, and there are hundreds of impact categories among which I can select the ones I'm interested at. And then I will have to decide how many pieces of the supply chain I want to consider. And this is the system boundary setting. So, I mean, if I'm only interested in this step, which is the production of biscuits in the plant, I will focus only on the, can you see, let's see, the laser here, okay. If you're only interested in this part, you will just put you will just collect the data on this aspect. While if you want to consider wider system boundaries, you will have to collect data and information from all these processes. Okay, so once you have set the boundaries, you will have to decide the data you want to collect and the level of accuracy. So this means that you will have to make a detailed inventory of the process involved, and you have to identify, if possible, if you can just overlook some process, because, as I said, it's very time expensive to collect all the data. So if you find out that a process has a very, very low impact, you can just remove it from the list. Okay, so now just a quick recap. So if everything is clear until now, we can start with the exercise. So just to recap, it's important to define first the goal, which is the purpose of the study, then the scope, so the system boundaries, the unit, the functional unit, and then I have to make the list, the inventory of all the processes I want to include in my analysis. And once I have this list, and this list should be composed of the items and the quantity of the items I need. Once I have this list, I can convert each item of the list into an environmental impact. Okay, so if you all have the Excel sheet, we can go ahead. And this is a study you probably saw this morning. This is a study I published with Professor Pastres, and we assessed the impacts of trout in Italy. And the goal was to assess the impacts of a long segment of the supply chain by collecting primary data. And this is something uncommon, because usually you find life cycle assessment analysis focusing on a single core process. So in a life cycle assessment, usually the primary data are collected directly from the farm, from a plant, and then you take all the other information from upstream processes and downstream processes from literature. While in this case, we collected data directly from each segment of the supply chain. And this is a picture of the system boundaries. You can find the same one inside the paper. And so the system is composed of 4 different phases. First, the production of the feed you provide to the animals, then the fish farming, the fish grow out. Then you have the fish processing into food for human consumption. And then while processing the fish, you will get byproducts. They are the heads of the fish, the tails, the skin. All these byproducts are not considered as waste, but they are used to, they are purchased to another company where they are used to produce pet food ingredients. Okay, and for each of these phases, you have a list of inputs. So you have goods, consumable goods. So in this case, you have all the ingredients for the feed production, the transportation of these ingredients, the energy and water consumption, and the infrastructures and equipment which goes inside this phase. And the phase of feed production has one single output, which is aquafeed, the feed for animals, for fish. And this product enters as an input in the second phase, together with again other inputs. So you will again have other chemicals and the transportation of these products, and energy and water consumption, and the use of infrastructures and equipments. And as output, you will have solid fish metabolic wastes, so the feces of the fish. And of course, you will have the fish. and the fish is trout at a marketable size. And this fish will be the main input of phase 3, where it will be processed into food for human consumption. And as I said, you will get the byproduct processes, the byproduct composed of heads and skins and so on. And they will enter the last phase, where you will get the pet food ingredients and organic residuals. I prepared a second scheme of the system boundaries. It is exactly as this one. It is just a bit more nice, I think. But you can see there are, again, the same 4 phases. So the production of the feed, fish grow out, fish processing, and byproduct processing. And here you can see all the inputs and outputs in every single step. So the production of the ingredients from agriculture and the fish oil and fish meal, they enter into the feed plant, they are converted into the feed, and the feed enter the second system with all the other inputs, and then you get the main output, the fish, and water and some dead animal here. And again, here you have the processing of the fish and the processing of byproduct. Okay, so in the Excel file you received, you will find a table describing this segment, this phase, and this phase. So the fish grow out and the fish processing, and that's the aspect of the Excel file. So this is a simplified version of the inventory that you will find in the paper. And you have to focus on one step at a time. So first start with the number 1. And you have to assess the impact assessment of this segment of the fish grow out. And as you can see, you have the list, the inventory of all the processes. You have the quantity you need. You have the output produced. You produce 1,000 kilograms, so 1 ton of trout. And then on the right side, you have the coefficients here to convert these quantities into impact. And the impact I choose is the carbon footprint, which is measured in terms of kilogram of CO2 equivalent to the air. And it is a way to measure the contribution of the process to the global warming. Okay, so once you have assessed this impact, you can go to the exercise number 2. Basically, you have to do the same. And the final task is to try to find a way to quantify, to split the impacts between the product and the byproduct. I won't tell you nothing more, because I think it's a quite simple exercise. So the purpose is just to force you to understand the basic mechanism. I will give you 15 minutes to complete it. If you finish earlier, just write it in the chat. And if you have any question, just write again in the chat. But I think that 15 minutes is more than necessary. So just let's start. I will share the screen. Okay, I think you should see it. Okay, so this is the solution. And okay, here the impact assessment is quite easy. So basically you were just asked to multiply the quantity, as you can see here, the quantity by the coefficient, the conversion coefficient. So the kilogram of CO2 equivalent emitted to air to produce 1 kilogram of feed. This quantity by the amount of feed. And that's exactly the same for all the other inputs here, with the exception of the diesel, because as someone asked before correctly, the diesel is in liters, while here we have the conversion in terms of kilowatt per hour. So first, you were supposed to convert the liters into kilowatt per hour in this way. So multiplying the liters per the energy content of the diesel. The diesel is the fuel oil in diesel engine. And then once you have multiplied this amount by this, you can use the coefficient. And that's the result. So again, for the water, for the river, you have no impact because you don't have to produce the water. You just take it for free from nature. It's a natural resource from nature. You have to get rid of the dead biomass by incinerating it, and this causes an impact. And if you want to assess the total impact of this step, you just have to sum the impact contribution of each item. So, and this makes sense because if you want to get one ton of trout at marketable size, you are supposed to consume all these resources and burn this amount of biomass. So you have to carry out all these processes to get this. So all these impacts, the sum of all these impacts, which is this one, is the total impact you are going to cause to nature to produce this amount. So it's 2.4 tons of CO2 equivalent to produce 1 ton of product of trout. And in the second step of the exercise, the scheme, the procedure was exactly the same. So you have to multiply the amount by the coefficient. The difference was here because you had to find a way to link these two processes. So the farming of the fish with the processing of the fish. So you were just asked to make a conversion in order to say, okay, here 1 ton of trout caused this impact. So here I need 1 ton, 0.8, and you have just to make a conversion to a proportion and assess the impact of this input here. And then again, all these impacts are assessed in the conventional way. Here you can see that the water has an impact because this is not water from the river. This is water from the supply water supply system. So it's tap water, and therefore in this case you have to consider all the water supply systems. So all the activities involved in order to provide you fresh water in your house, and this has an impact. So again, the total impact is the sum of all these aspects, and this is the total impact we were looking for. So this is the impact caused by the production of these two processes. If you want to get 1 ton of food for human consumption plus 880 kilograms of byproduct, we are going to emit this quantity of CO2 equivalent to the air. And the last step of the exercise was try to find a way to split this impact between the two outputs of the system. And this is a problem we didn't have here because the first system was a system with a single output. So it was kind of easy. You just have to sum everything and allocate all the impacts to the single product. In this case, we have one process, but two outputs. So we have to distribute the total impacts, part of the impact to this and part of the impact to the byproduct. And you can do, it's a controversial topic, it's quite a debated topic. Basically, there are two main approaches, a mass allocation and an economic allocation. In the mass allocation, here you have again the quantity, so 1 ton of food and 880 kilograms of byproducts. So this means that you have in mass, you have 53% of the mass represented by the food and 47 by the byproducts. In terms of economical value, you have 99% of the contribution due to the to the main product, the trout ready for human consumption, and you have 1% of the product of the impact. Sorry, 1% of the impact due to the production of byproducts. So if you choose the mass allocation, this is the final results. So again, this is a simple mathematical conversion. So you have to multiply the total quantity. You have to take 53% of the total impact and say, okay, this 53% of this impact is caused by the production of 1 ton of trout. So this means that if I multiply this quantity by 53 and then I divide by the quantity, I get this 2.6 kilogram of CO2 equivalent to produce 1 kilogram of trout. And if I do the same here for the byproduct, so if I multiply the total quantity by 47% and then I divide by the quantity produced, I obtain again 2.6, which is exactly the same amount, and this makes sense in mathematical terms. So 2.6 kilogram of CO2 equivalent emitted to the air to produce 1 kilogram of byproducts. Okay, if I use the same approach, but if I consider the economical value, so here you can see I adopted the same approach. So the total impact multiplied by 99% divided by 1,000 kilograms. And here you can see that things changes, because in this case, we are charging most of the impact of the total impact to the trout and almost nothing to the byproducts. So this is a very, the decision of the allocation approach to adopt is a very sensitive part of life cycle assessment. It's not the only sensitive aspect, but it's very important to decide which one to adopt and justify your decision, because in this way it will result, the impact caused by the production of trout will be almost the double of this one. So it's a very important aspect. Okay, so back again to the presentation. If something is unclear, just write it right now in the chat, so we can see what's we can resolve your doubts right now.
There is an alarming message from Barbara.
Oh, okay. So what
it says, I am confused.
Okay, I'm here to solve the problem. How does the economic view change things? Because if you, I mean, life cycle assessment is not wrong. It's just that life cycle assessment is a very flexible tool. So there is not a single way to assess an impact. There are thousands of possible combinations. The point is you have to write papers saying, okay, I adopted this approach, these assumptions, and this, and this, and this, and this is the result. But in most of the cases, when you read about impacts, I don't know, on the packaging of food or on the webs, on a website, you just find out that the final result, just the kilogram of CO2 equivalent. You don't know how it was assessed. So if you see, I can go back to the I can share again the screen. If you remember, in the economic allocation, we got an impact which was the double of the one obtained with the mass allocation. And if I want to sell my product and this product has a double impact compared to the product of my competitor, but this is just because I made an assumption and he made another assumption, then, I mean, it's not fair. So a fair comparison is possible only if the assessment is made exactly doing the same, adopting the same approach, the same allocation approach, the same impact assessment method, the same impact category. So you can compare things, but only if you adopt exactly the same approach. That's a key.
Yeah, I was saying that this morning, but maybe in my talk I packed up too many things, and of course this is a problem for the communication. And as Silvia was saying, sometimes you can find very diverse estimates of impacts for things that look very similar, and the reason why could be the different methodologies rather than the differences in the production processes.
Yeah.
So the difference in the economic weight is that it just because it has a bigger value that then it becomes a higher value itself?
No, you give a higher burden to the more valuable product. Okay, so if, for example, you sell a kilo of trout at €6 and a kilo of raw matter to the factory at €1, okay, the burden to the environmental trout in terms of impact will be 6 times higher compared to the pet food. You redistribute the burden. You calculate the CO2 equivalent for the process, okay? But then you say you have to allocate this kilo of CO2 between the two products which are the output of your process.
Yeah, I will share the results here in the chat so you can have a look at the results as well. And
there are other comments, Silvia, if you want to look. Maybe it's quicker than I read them.
Okay. Just no, that's, I think I just shared this with Professor
Don is asking if you can share the correct answer of the calculation.
Yeah, sure.
Rudina,
okay,
who is an economist, is saying that this looks like a break-even analysis of multiple products. That I don't know, but maybe Rudina can explain what is a break-even analysis of multiple products.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. First of all, did you receive in the chat the results? Can you? No. Okay. Okay. I will just send it to the Gain Summer School, and they will send the results to you by email if you can't see it in the chat. Okay.
Okay.
So break even. No, I don't. Okay. Let's start from the beginning. So what's the first question? The first question is the one of Fabio. Okay, Fabio asked, yeah, it's an interesting question, the one made by Fabio, because it's about carbon sequestration, if I'm correct. So basically it means that, I mean, everything you do, every time you create or destroy something, every time you consume something or you put something back to the environment, you are causing an impact. But it's not necessarily a negative impact. It could also be a positive impact. It depends. Most of the time is negative, but it can also be positive. For instance, there are some agricultural practice is capable to absorb more CO2 than the quantity which is emitted to the air. So in this way, we are removing CO2 from the air, and this is, of course, a positive impact. The problem is that there is not an international agreement on the method to quantify this positive impact. So they are still debating about the best way to assess this positive impact due to carbon sequestration through agricultural practices. And
sorry, I may add another example more pertinent to aquaculture, because we did a life cycle assessment of shellfish.
Oh yeah, sure.
And for example, in case of shellfish, the shellfish reduce eutrophication by filtering particulate carbon from the water and nitrogen, and therefore embodied in the phytoplanktonic cells, and therefore you may have a positive effect on eutrophication rather than a negative one. Maybe I can post this paper as well for people who are more interested in shellfish. So you can compare shellfish and production and finfish production.
Yeah, and well, with regards to animal farming, is more difficult to obtain this kind of results. You can, of course, you can work in order to reduce the impact, the negative impact, but it's very difficult to cause a positive impact by farming animals, because they are emitting CO2. I mean, they are animals, not plants. So it's more challenging. You can get this, you can achieve this aim with, for instance, the example made by Professor Pastres with some type of mussels. But if you are farming, I don't know, a chicken, it's kind of challenging to absorb carbon while you are just farming a chicken. So it really depends on the, but that's for sure. It is possible to produce things in a more sustainable way. So it doesn't make sense to find out to consume only the products which are absorbing carbon dioxide, but it does make sense to select the ones we are causing the minor negative impact. I don't know if it was, maybe my sentence was a bit confused, but yeah, you have just to pay more attention to the descriptions, and it's very time consuming, but things in Europe, mainly in Europe, are changing, and there are more and more labels, green labels on the products, providing information about the sustainability of the products you are eating or you are consuming, the clothes and everything else. Okay, so CO2, other questions? Calculation for the individual. Okay, the impact of water. Major products that cause significant carbon emission. Yeah, okay. Another problem is that life cycle assessment is a technique created by engineer, and firstly it was applied to industrial processing. So, for instance, to produce I don't know, steel in a plant, or this kind of things. And then people in the agricultural field began to apply life cycle assessment to their systems. But the production of food is more complex than a plant which produces steel. And there is an interaction with nature. So there are plants in the river that are absorbing things, but it is impossible to take into account a whole ecosystem into a life cycle assessment. So if you are studying this kind of impacts, it is very important not to just run a life cycle assessment. That's okay to run a life cycle assessment, but then you have to add other analysis on the quality of the water, on the ecosystem, on the surrounding ecosystem, to check if everything is okay. LCA alone is not enough. Mechanical power, like using water pumps and less water, is the water. Okay, in the case study I provided to you, the water was just diverted from the river without using pumps, so there was not energy consumption to divert it. It was just by gravity. But in other cases, you can consume energy to pump the water in your system, and then in that case, you have to consider also the energy consumption. Yeah, it depends on the system.
For example, if you are using groundwater, as it is the case for a lot of the trout farms in the Veneto area.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then here we are to the payment for environmental services. Again, yeah, as I said before, it's very complex to take into account the all the interaction with the surrounding environment with the life cycle assessment. So the environmental services, you can try to quantify something by means of an LCA, but it's better to integrate the analysis with other types of analysis. Yeah. And there is a paper there. Okay, so this is just a comment. It's
the based on the previous one. Yeah.
Did I miss something, or
no, I think that
you
covered more or less all the questions, but if there are more questions, maybe towards the end we will have another.
Yeah, because there are just a few slides left, so we can conclude. I can conclude the presentation. Then, if there will be other questions,
yes, of course,
I would be happy to answer. Okay, so as I said before, it's very important to define the goal, because according to the goal, you will know how much effort you have to put in your analysis. Because as you can see here, on the blue line is the exact impact you are causing to the environment, and it is impossible to assess it properly because you are using a mathematical model. So you will get closer and closer to the real value, but you will never know exactly what is the entity of the impact. And the black curve is the results you are getting. So if you put just a small effort with just a preliminary analysis, you will get kind of close, you will get a general idea of the impact with just a very small effort. But this will allow you just to get a preliminary idea of the results. If you move on the right side a little bit, you can see you will have to put more effort. You will get closer to the blue line, to the real results, and this kind of effort is just justified if you want to, for instance, start to compare things. Then you have to strive a little bit and collect some more data. And when you have to compare and communicate the results, in that case, you have to collect a high amount of data, which should be of high quality, and carry out a very precise life cycle assessment, because you are going to communicate the results, and this could represent a competitive advantage for you on the market if you are selling a product. So it's very important to put a high effort on the analysis and to be very sure of the results. But this picture is just to show you and to make you think about the effort. It's not always necessary to put a lot of effort. It just depends on the goal. And okay, so again, for a recap, you need data, and the data can be collected, can be primary data or secondary data. Primary data are data which are collected directly in the plant which you are studying. So you collect, you are studying the impact caused by a plant which produce, a company which produce the feed. Okay, so you have to contact that company and collect all the real data, the primary data about their energy consumption, water consumption, the waste they produce, the packaging they are using, etc. These are primary data. But of course, you cannot collect primary data along the whole supply chain. It's not possible because there are too many. So you are allowed in specific cases to use data from databases, and primary data and these secondary data from databases are then converted into environmental impacts in the way you did before in the Excel file. So you have the list, the inventory list, and you convert every item of the list into an environmental impact. And the good news is that there are assessment tools that do this automatically. So you are not supposed to use an Excel file every time. And there are databases. I will first show you databases, and then I will show you some assessment tool. So these are the main databases available. They are huge and international accepted databases. Each database contains thousands of processes, and some of these databases is free, some is not. For instance, the 4 databases, these 4 are the most important databases if you want to study the food sector. EcoInvent is in general the most important database. It is internationally recognized as the largest one and most consistent one. While you have 2 databases, the AgriFootprint and the AgriBalise databases, and they include processes in the agricultural and food sector. So agriculture, animal farming, and the processing of both. And the first one is a project of a Dutch consultancy firm, and while AgriBalise is a result of a partnership between public and private research institute in France. So you can see that the providers of these databases are different. And the last one, GFLI, is a brand new database. It is a part of a project launched in 2015, and this is free. Both GFLI and AgriBalise are free. The last one is created with the aim to support a correct assessment of the feed production. So it is only about the feed you produce and you provide to the animals. Okay, so these are the 4 main databases you can use when you study the food system. And these are the 3 main assessment tools. Simapro and Gabi are the most used ones. OpenLCA has the advantage to be completely free of charge. So you can download OpenLCA this afternoon and try to use it. It's completely free. You can also download a Simapro tutorial. You can use it, I think, 10 or 20 times, and then it will just automatically stop. But you can download that Simapro tutorial, and in order to have a look at how it is inside and how it works. And here I provide you also a couple of slides. This is how Simapro looks like. So when you enter in Simapro and you click on the left on the processes name, you will get on the right side the list of thousands of processes. So you can see the first line. I am reading the first line: wheat grain market mix at regional storage. PL, I don't remember actually what it is. RO is Romani, UK, then you have the Netherlands. RER is Europe, an average impact for Europe. Then you have United States, Denmark, France, etc. For the wheat grain, the barley grain, the maize, the oat grain, rice, etc. And there are thousands of processes. And if you double click on one of these processes, that's what you will see inside. So one of these processes inside is made like this. So the first line is the product, the output of your process. For instance, this process describes the average production of organic grain meant for feed purposes in Switzerland. And the name is rye grain feed organic Switzerland production, 1 kilogram. So this means that in order to produce 1 kilogram of this product, you have to consume these land resources. You can see two types of consumptions related to the occupation of land, and other two processes related to the transformation lands. Then you have to use, for instance, the seeds, so rye grain seeds, in order to farm new grain, new rye, and then you have to consume tap water and to consume electricity and heat and so on, and you will emit water into the air, and you will also include in the analysis the treatment of wastewater. So this is a process. If you just click the run, let's say, on in the software, the software will automatically convert all these lines into the total impact assessment of the production of 1 kilogram of rye. So it definitely makes your life easier. The problem is that you have thousands of processes, and it's challenging to choose the correct process you have to use to carry out a good life cycle assessment. So the software are very helpful, but then you are required to, it is required an in-deep knowledge about the process, because otherwise you won't be able to choose between all these processes. And I can guarantee you have a very, very, very long list of processes among which you have to choose. And basically that's all. So yeah, so I will just stop the sharing the PowerPoint. And yeah, if you want to contact me, this is my email address, so maiolo@pfconsult.it, and Perfect Food is the name of my company. So just write me if you have any further question.